Good day, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Terry Martin. I'm with NAPSG Foundation. Thanks so much for joining us today. We're going to get started in just a couple of minutes, but I want to give folks a chance to get through the lobby and join. So I'll just start with a few logistics. Due to the number of folks in attendance, your lines have been muted. For questions, we'll be using the Q&A feature within Teams. We would like to encourage you to use that. So, throughout the conversation, feel free to type in your questions as they come to mind, and we'll have the panelists answering them as they can. And if time permits, we may select a handful of questions to cover live at the end. I also want to mention that if for some reason the Q&A button is grayed out for you, just go ahead and use the chat. That's just fine. All right. And last logistical item, the webinar is being recorded, and that along with the slides and the Q&A will be made available after the event. So if you've registered, you will receive an email when they are available. They will also get posted to our events page. So, if you missed anything, it'll all be in your inbox or on the event page after the fact. Okay. So with that out of the way, I want to hand it over to Denise Ross, Senior Fellow at the Federation of American Scientists and our co-host for this event to kick us off. So over to you, Denise.
Thank you, Terry. Hello, all. I'm Denise Ross. I served as the Chief Data Scientist of the United States. And as Terry mentioned, I'm the Senior Fellow at the Federation of American Scientists now. Welcome to this rapid response data briefing on the Homeland Infrastructure Foundation level data, otherwise known as HIFLD, co-hosted by the National Alliance for Public Safety GIS Foundation, the Federation of American Scientists, DataIndex.us, and the Association of Public Data Users. We are here today to help bolster DHS's recent call for use cases about how emergency managers and others use HIFLD data and how this collection benefits American communities. We will be sharing some specific actions today, and we'll follow up with that information via email at the conclusion of the event. The HIFLD collection is personal to me. 15 years ago, I prepped for my first tropical storm as the interim GIS manager for the city of New Orleans by rounding up data on where vulnerable people might be, schools, nursing homes, childcare centers, etc. And my role was to then submit that up to the Emergency Operations Center. This process involved a lot of emailing and spreadsheet wrangling. I checked over the data one more time before I sent it upstairs to the EOC and was horrified to see that St. Rita's nursing home, where 34 residents perished when the Katrina levees failed, was on the nursing home spreadsheet that I'd received from the state. Given that experience, I deeply appreciate the role that HIFLD Open and Secure play in bolstering our collective capacity to prepare for and respond to emergencies. It's sort of like a digital go bag for emergencies that has the basic data layers a community will need to head off the worst outcomes. So today we have an all-star panel, including Terry Martin, who kicked us off. She's the Chief Geospatial Information Officer with NAPSG, and she'll talk about what's in HIFLD. Then we have Carrie DeMay, the GIS Manager for the City of New Orleans, who will cover why HIFLD is important. And Daniel Stolb, the GIS Program Coordinator with Oregon's Department of Emergency Management, who will share lessons from the HIFLD Open Crosswalk and other useful insights. And then Jeff Barani, the Emergency Management Technical Lead for Esri, who will provide information on accessing HIFLD Open data layers in the Living Atlas and elsewhere. So Terry, I'm going to start with you. Given your close work participating on the HIFLD subcommittee and a long history as a HIFLD data user, both at NAPSG and as a former local emergency management GIS analyst, can you give us an overview of what's in HIFLD?
I sure can. Thank you, Denise. So yes, I have worked with HIFLD for quite a long time, even going back to the days when it was the Homeland Security Infrastructure Program, or HIP. So I guess I'm clearly dating myself now. But all right. So while the initiative name and the delivery method have changed, the intent of the data catalog has not. It remains the same. So, and that was to deliver mission critical geospatial data of the highest possible quality and currency to meet the emerging and persistent needs of stakeholders and partners throughout the Homeland Security enterprise. So in short, it is a collection of geospatial data sets to support DHS missions, Homeland Security, incident response, and emergency management. Up until recently, it was divided into two repositories. The first was open, which is, as it sounds, available to the public, and secure, which has had both license and FOUO data sets. So data coverage includes all 50 states, and it crosses a variety of topics, everything from agriculture to emergency services and routing. And this data catalog has been curated, managed, and maintained by the DHS Geospatial Management Office. So HIFLD Open specifically is the kind of the point of our call today, is what's been deprecated. It did contain an abundance of data from numerous sources all in one place. And that was really the power of it. Open and available through multiple formats, including REST services that you could directly connect to in your public apps. And HIFLD was hosted on the Geo platform. So practically speaking, what does the HIFLD deprecation mean to you? So most of that data is still publicly available, but you have to go to each individual source for that data. So it could be USGS, Army Corps of Engineers, et cetera. And the GMO has really helped with that. And Daniel Stoll will share more on the crosswalk that they created when he speaks here shortly. So now some of that data has been migrated from open to HIFLD Secure, and those who have secure access, and we'll talk more about that shortly, can still access those data sets, although they will have a new URL that you'll have to fix in your applications, and those REST services will not be open. It's important to note, though, that licensed data that was previously in Secure has not been impacted. So as you can see here, quite a bit of data is still available on Secure across all these categories. And the count for each may not be exact, but it's a close estimate as of this past week. They are each available as either a feature service or a download. Many of these I know are critical to your missions, which is why we're having this call today. Getting access to Secure, I previously mentioned that HIFLD was open and that it sat on the Geo platform. Secure is located on the Geospatial Information Infrastructure, or the GII. This is a shared, sensitive, but unclassified platform that is managed by the GMO. So getting access is really straightforward if you have a DHS PIV or CAT card. But for most who do not, that would be the state and local partners, you simply need to create a login.gov account. You must sign a data use agreement, and at least at this time, have a federal sponsor. So for anyone who's not really sure about that process, if you work closely with your FEMA region, that may be an avenue. I would also recommend reaching out to the HIFLD team, and we'll make sure to put that in the chat as well. I know they've been receiving this question, and they can provide more guidance on that. So I hope that was helpful, albeit a very high-level explanation of HIFLD and its current status. So with that, I can turn it back over to you, Denise.
Thank you, Terry. And Carrie, you're up next. I know you've got a small but mighty team there at the City of New Orleans, and you all have squeezed so much value out of HIFLD. Can you tell us why HIFLD is so important for New Orleans and the work you do?
I was going to say, happy to. And hello, my name is Carrie DeMay, and like Denise said, I am the GIS manager here at the City of New Orleans. And how we support the city, like they said, we're small but mighty, and we support everything from standing up our enterprise systems such as asset management, to supporting departments that don't necessarily have an embedded GIS person. Like a bigger department such as DPW. We support a lot of initiatives from both health, environmental, and most importantly, public safety, where we are often not so much on the front end of initial response, although I am the backup. We do a lot of work in response to the recovery and build up after.
Oh, Carrie, I think you're muted, and if you could advance your slides, that would be great. I know we're figuring out Teams.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, got a little front of me. So, were you able to hear my introduction?
We heard you. Yeah, no, it just muted a second ago. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Again, working out the kinks. Okay. So our HIFLD era. If you're unfamiliar with New Orleans, we are sandwiched in between two other parishes, St. Bernard to our west. St. Bernard to our east, and Jefferson Parish to our west. Surrounded by that is an extremely sensitive ecosystem. So we kind of have the juxtaposition of both a very industrial region as well as an ecological sensitive one. Thrown in the mix with that, if you've ever been to New Orleans, we certainly have a good time. So tourism is also a big driver of the economy here in the city. And with that certainly comes all of the safety precautions with having a large concentration of people in such a small area. So in going through some of the use cases, a lot of them are very similar in that it involves crossing jurisdictions, political boundaries, and making sure that we have a complex and good understanding of everything from our baseline data sets to some of our more important and environmental ones as well. Denise had used the example of group homes. One of the things that helps supplement a lot of our information are those bigger generalized data sets such as healthcare, utilities, transportation, routes, and again, those vulnerable population facilities such as schools, group homes, universities. I use the example of hospitals. For the example on the screen, one of the bigger trauma centers is actually just over the line in Jefferson Parish, and oftentimes we tend to kind of focus in on those boundaries, but we certainly know that disasters do not follow political or geopolitical boundaries. And getting a little ahead of myself here. So one of the other uses that we relied heavily on is supplementing data that we just don't have the time or the expertise to collect. I mentioned we are a port city, so the Mississippi is a very powerful body of water that we need to better understand. And though we don't directly do any maintenance or navigation through the waterways, it's important to know river markers, levees. In the case of the saltwater intrusion, which I didn't know was a thing until, was it just the other year? It was important to be able to use that baseline data because we needed to see and track its progression up the Mississippi and its impact on New Orleans. And then behind that is the ever popular flooding, FEMA data, and again, having a lot of these resources, especially the Army Corps of Engineering data, in with some of the other environmental data that's around, was extremely helpful and saved us a ton of time when having to go search for, like I said, river gauges or levee gates or anything that has changed in between then. And then I do want to preface that much of the HIFLD data that I have mentioned, we did use from the open HIFLD structure. With large events such as Taylor Swift and then eventually the Super Bowl, we were elevated to a higher level of a SEER rating. Again, just because of the concentration of the people and the impact on the city. And with that, there were just tons of other agencies and folks from all over the nation that came to New Orleans in support of large-scale events like this. So it was actually a lot of the HIFLD data that folks were familiar with from other agencies. So there was the ability to kind of communicate and recognize that we were looking at the same data. It was easy to fill in gaps for other common operating pictures in the EOC. We had two others that again kind of used shared resources, which is where a lot of the map service provided the convenience to be able to ingest and share. And then right after the Super Bowl, we rolled right into Mardi Gras. And so a lot of that is just in prep and is now, well, was at the time being sustained through in a model that we were going to more or less package and shelve till Mardi Gras the following year. Because again, we're small and having to generate content over and over again, though relatively easy to some degree, there's still discrepancies in data access, broken links, pop-ups, and in the advent of public safety, time is precious, as is money. And so having to reach out and or look for that information elsewhere, all the while having to vet it can be time consuming. And if anyone ever finds themselves in New Orleans, this is definitely a topic that I can talk long about. So happy to take any questions. My contact information is there if people have anything specific, not necessarily about HIFLD data, just New Orleans emergency response in general. I'm always happy to hear from fellow professionals. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. So that I'm really grateful for you bringing to life how important HIFLD has been for New Orleans and making sure that Taylor Swift and Mardi Gras and Super Bowl all go off as planned. I wanted to take a few minutes to just give a risk assessment of the stability of these data with all the changes that are happening in the federal data landscape. Here's an assessment of the risk that might be facing DHS's HIFLD data, in particular, sort of divided into what bodes well for the HIFLD collection and what bodes less well. I'll start with the good news. As Terry mentioned, HIFLD open data layers are still available at their original agencies, which is great news. These data haven't disappeared. It's the collection that's been terminated. Another reason for optimism is that HIFLD Secure is not at face value misaligned with any administration priorities. And lastly, and most importantly, very encouraging, is the fact that DHS specifically requested input on how jurisdictions like you all are using HIFLD. They even created a 2-minute video asking for your input on why these data matter to you and your work. On the less encouraging side, of course, is the termination of HIFLD Open last month. That's concerning, and we know that the former HIFLD Open data layers will likely become more brittle when they're not centralized by DHS. That's just more exposure for these data supply chains and more room for links to break. And most notably, for those data sets that are produced across federal agencies like Energy, HHS, DHS, and whatnot, government-wide reductions in staff, cuts to contracts, and increased bottlenecks are continuing to cause damage to the entire federal data apparatus, and HIFLD data sets may be impacted by that. I want to go back to the good news, though. I have never seen an agency create a video like this asking for public feedback on a data set. So huge hats off to DHS for being so proactive in soliciting feedback from the user community. I think this type of public engagement is what was envisioned in the Open Government Data Act, which was signed by President Trump in 2018 under the Evidence Act. DHS is really leading by example in how to better understand the value of federal data assets for the American people and how federal data can be improved to deliver better outcomes and keep Americans safe. So here's an example of the type of use case that they are seeking. I pulled this from the video that they posted. They want to know what your role is, and with what organization, what HIFLD data set or data sets you use, and how you use them. And I'll add, you'll get bonus points, or I'll give you bonus points if you add anything about how these data helped keep your community out of harm's way. So with that, Terry, I'll hand it off to you to share how people can respond to this call to action from our data colleagues inside DHS.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so we've banged the drum a bit here for the need for use cases. I'm going to continue to do that. So I'm going to talk through your options and ask that you open up the one that is available to you and start your submission live as we talk through this together. You'll get in the chat are your two options that you also see live on the screen. You may not finish, but if it is open on your desktop or your phone, I hope you'll be able to take a couple more minutes after this webinar to submit. So I will walk through, or I'll talk through both of these options. Someone on our team has added those links to the chat, so please pick the one that makes sense to you. And I'm going to talk through which one you should potentially go for. So the first and preferred way is to log into the GII. If you have a PIV or CAC card, as I mentioned, that's pretty straightforward. When you log in, a GII account will be created for you. For those without those credentials, but who are in the public sector mission part, who are in the public sector and are a mission partner with Homeland Security or have a public safety mission, you can create a login.gov account, and the HIFLD team will notify you if your account request has been approved or denied. Okay. So once you have an account, you simply log in. They want you to complete your My HIFLD profile, and then you click on the Submit a Use Case or Request to complete the DHS GMO Survey 123 form. So another example of what they're looking for those who might not know exactly what to put in a use case. So here's one from a Coast Guard officer who is looking to combine their Coast Guard data on smuggling routes with updated maps of US boundaries. So something that communicates how you're using HIFLD data for your specific mission. So for those of you who do not have a GII account and likely may not be able to get one, if you're in the private sector or unable to get a sponsor, you can use the QR code or copy the link that's in the chat. These results will get shared with DHS to supplement what they are collecting. So if you haven't already at this time, please either go to the GII and log in and navigate through those steps, right? We're here kind of monitoring the chat and can help you as we can. So either do that, go to the GII and log in. If you go that route, your input will be used directly in the GMO prioritization rubric. But if that's not an option, that's what we're doing here with this additional form through the NAPSG Survey 123. Both take the same amount of time, roughly 3 to 5 minutes. It really depends on the number of data sets that are important to your use case. So that one step can take a little bit of time to kind of click through all of the important data sets to you. I do want to mention that if you are completing the GMO form, you do need to finish in one session. So I would say as you start to go through the process, enter your questions in the Q&A. We are not the HIFLD GMO office, right? But a lot of us have been through the process and can maybe help you or at least point you in the right direction. HIFLD has been, despite all of the transitions and everything, they've been pretty responsive. If you haven't heard back, I'm not sure about the turnaround expectations. We can certainly put that in the chat again, or maybe for the first time, their HIFLD inbox. You could certainly reach back out and make sure it hasn't slipped through the cracks. All right, so I will keep an eye on the chat for anything that comes through when I'm not speaking and try to help where I can. Let us know if you have any issues with the NAPSIG form. Sometimes you get a little, it takes a minute for it to load, but definitely let us know if you have any issues with that as well. All right, so I will pause there. Hopefully everyone has them open, have put in some of your initial credentials and are thinking during this webinar about maybe some good use cases that you can provide so that we can help them prioritize, what data is actually really critical for our mission. So thank you for that. I can stop sharing and I will hand it back to you, Denise.
Sounds good. Thank you. I think we have a few minutes while people are getting their sea legs on these forms. If anybody has any questions, and I can't see the Q&A, but Terry, if there's any questions in the Q&A, we have 4 minutes before the next part of the webinar starts.
All right, so I'm not seeing any in the Q&A yet, but some folks are, thank you. And I'm sorry, I'm looking at my other screen. Some folks are going through the process. And so, yes, so we do tackle both HIFLD open and secure in the form. And so when you go to the home page, I might just go back. So if you're trying to get into the GII, I'm going to go back to the steps. So for folks who have who are public sector, what you want to do is go to the I don't know how long the the DHS survey will be available either. That's another good question that we'll put out to them and try to include in the Q&A with the materials. So when you go to the GII, it'll prompt you to log in if you have an account already or create an account. So you'll need to create an account, a login.gov account, and go through that process. You'll need to know who your sponsor is at that time, who you're going to list as a sponsor. And it sounds like some folks have gone through that process recently, which is great. And it may be taking a little bit of time to hear back. So I would encourage you to start it right away. I know we have some hurricanes brewing, so I would go through the whole login process if you can today to get that ball rolling. I'm just looking to see if there's any more. Yes, so it does sound like there's still some folks who are struggling with the sponsor. And as our executive director put it in the chat earlier, DHS is getting that question a lot, and they're going to be putting out some guidance on that. So hang tight if you are struggling with the sponsor. It does sound like they're going to be sending out some guidance on that very soon. And that's all I'm seeing, Denise.
Great. And I would encourage people, thank you. I love the idea of sharing these survey links with your colleagues. And please send both of them because some of them will be able to access secure and others might still be having challenges accessing secure. So if you send both links, the NAPSIG version of the link will be easy for anybody to access. All right. And with that, why don't we move on to the next part of our discussion. So next up is Daniel from Oregon. Daniel, you have been involved with HIFLD and engaging with the subcommittee for a long time. Can you share how you approached the HIFLD open deprecation and worked with stakeholders across your state in Oregon?
All right. Thanks, Denise. Yeah, so a little bit about the background for what we did for the HIFLD dataset review. Obviously, this was something that was a fairly quick turnaround for us to be able to negotiate and talk with our partners and figure out actually what was going to be happening out there. So I think I want to start a little bit by talking about, how do we utilize the HIFLD program data in our kind of emergency mapping application. So just because we are in emergency management, we love throwing acronyms out there. we have a product called the Real-Time Assessment and Planning Tool for Oregon, RAPTOR, just because we love having interesting acronyms out there. But that is what we utilize for our situational awareness mapping system. Basically, it is Web App Builder plus Extra, and we are basically pulling in additional data sets on the fly to kind of do those planning elements there. So if we have something happen in a given area, we have the ability to switch a configuration of that application, highlight data necessary for that particular type of event, and then add in additional data sets on the fly based upon what sort of stuff we need to know about or be aware of given areas. One of the things that we had been utilizing within that application was a HIFLD group query, which basically took all of those different elements of the HIFLD program and did a master group query to pull in all of those data. One of the things that did disappear as a part of this transition was all of the groups that were set up in HIFLD Open. And so the group query that we had to be updated as a part of this process. One of the other things that we utilize HIFLD data for is when we are activated for our Emergency Coordination Center, we will create what we are calling a standardized incident portfolio. So this is information that highlights pertinent bits and pieces of data based upon key sectors within the state. And in the case and what you see on the slide deck here, that screenshot image there is from flooding that we had this past March, and highlighting the communication assets that are out there in the given area. So to put some context in here, the brightly colored areas that you see there are coming from the Sentinel imagery that was posted. Areas that had water that didn't normally have water is the best way that I can describe that. So being able to take that hazard information, combine it with reference data to really speak to what might be at risk in a given area. So taking a look at what was the process that we utilized to do this type of analysis and figure out what is going on where. The first step was communication with the HIFLD program and figuring out what are the different elements of data that will be impacted by this change, because HIFLD Open did include a lot of different data sets. We needed to know what was still going to be existing out there, maybe in a different format, what may be transitioned to the HIFLD Secure program, what information would be discontinued, like we need to take a snapshot of this data, otherwise it's going to disappear entirely. So I'm sure as many of you noticed, there was a message that was sent out from the HIFLD program directly that talked about the different data elements that they had, where things were going, and what was ending up happening there. So to dive a little bit deeper into kind of the crosswalk piece to the puzzle was really, like I said, that email message that came out. Because we all love working in spreadsheets, this was an exercise in filling out a spreadsheet and adding in additional information for us to be able to determine and perform an analysis and see whether that information that we had already out there, was this something that already existed through alternate sources that were out there, what things are no longer going to be maintained, and what things would be going to that HIFLD Secure only platform. So we added some columns into the spreadsheet that the HIFLD program produced there as kind of our component of analysis. So what was the pre-existing ArcGIS Online item? What is the new ArcGIS Online item out there? Did we encounter any errors when attempting to access that data? And what was kind of our evaluation? Was this something that was already existing out there? So the first piece of the puzzle is, once we figured out what all of those different data elements were, was then reaching out to our partners to figure out, okay, is this something that will be impacting other folks within our state? Because from what I could tell, most of the stuff that we were doing with the HIFLD program was very much with the State Emergency Management Agency, with my agency. So who all is going to be impacted by this, and reaching out to our emergency management GIS interest group and figuring out who are the key players to the piece of the puzzle here. We didn't have really very many agencies that responded back to this outreach effort, But what we wanted to do was make sure that we were transparent in the process and letting folks know, hey, here's what's happening here. We're going to be going through a review process on all of the information. Here is the initial set of data that we got from the HIFLD program to let you know, and giving them that heads up that, hey, we're going to be going through a process on review. Please let us know how you use this data. Based upon kind of that concept here, the next degree of a scope here was, okay, we've performed the outreach to our community, let them know what's happening, what's going on out there. And let's talk to all of our pertinent partners and figure out, is there information that maybe they have already? Is this information that exists within the state of Oregon? So taking a look at each of those HIFLD open data sets and literally opening it up and looking and seeing, is there any data within Oregon? Because if there is not any data within Oregon, and I'll also say our surrounding states are important to us as well, but if there is not important data in our given area, this is not information that we need to be as concerned with. And making sure that we're able to access that information. And when we do kind of get this information, making sure that we have the capability to share that out with our partners that are out there. So in performing that data set sourcing and partner coordination element, obviously, it's very easy to share content within ArcGIS Online. HIFLD Open utilized that platform very well. We wanted to replicate that process because there were groups that were already existing out there. We actually recreated a group to share out information with our partners. So with the review of these different data sets, being able to go through and figure out, okay, based upon the HIFLD Open spreadsheet that we got, and I'll say there were a lot of columns on that, but specifically on that page, there was an element here called the external landing page. This featured where the new location for that information would be stored, if that was going to be sponsored or continued to be updated by an external federal agency partner, and being able to go there and seeing, oh, hey, this data set still will exist. Here's what the new location is going to be. And in some cases, a hub site was featured that actually I had no awareness of previously. So being able to see what ancillary data sets are actually out there, and being able to determine what is the new hosting location and adding that into the spreadsheet to figure out, okay, what are the existing locations for that data? Working with Jeff Branny and his team at Esri Disaster Response Program and figuring out, okay, based upon the data that we're seeing come in here, what information that is currently posted to the Esri Living Atlas will continue to be there because it referenced a lot of those federal data sets or federal sources for that information. And for those areas that we have some existing state data for, hey, energy sector partners, tell me a little bit more about what you have in reference to this information. And based upon what you see in this data, is this information that we should be using, or is there maybe more specific information that a state of Oregon entity is maintaining? And in a couple of cases here, a lot of it actually pertained to energy sector information, dealing with those elements of the energy sector partners and where their areas were, because we had data that we were serving out already relating to like a find your utility service. So through this entire effort here, we were coordinating with our partners to figure out what data was already out there. Is this going to continue to exist after the HIFLD Open deprecation? And is this information that already exists as a state resource that we have out there already? And based upon that information, being able to go out and take that data, share it into a group to serve out in ArcGIS Online as a new ArcGIS Online group, and communicating with our partners and letting them know, hey, here's where you can go to find that information. So we had one specific for the HIFLD Open data sets that we found. but we also integrated it with our existing emergency preparedness data catalog. So this is a collection of information that we've been working on for a few years here that highlighted already existing data at the state level, and we kind of merged in that HIFLD open information and other data sources that we had come through here to have more of a holistic view of what is that emergency management data that exists out there. And for those elements that no longer exist, we actually reposted that information as a copy, documented it appropriately to say, hey, this is the last known update to this information, to at least provide a snapshot in time picture for that data that was served out on the HIFLD program. So I'm going to transition now over to a live demonstration. So bear with me. I typically don't like doing those things during a huge webinar like this, but just a quick confirmation that folks are able to see my screen here. All right, I saw a thumbs up. So this is taking a look at our emergency preparedness data catalog here. This is utilizing the filter gallery template with ArcGIS Online. But here we have featured all of the different data sets from the existing state resources that we had in combination with the federal data sets that were out there from the HIFLD program. What we've done with this information has been to take this and kind of catalog it in a slightly different manner, because a lot of our emergency management efforts that we've done have been focused around lifelines. So we actually took all of that data and have now classified it based upon the different FEMA lifelines that are out there, and then those data sets that pertain to a specific type of hazard. So you'll notice in the HIFLD Open program, they had some of the existing data pertaining to fire activity. So we have the ability to filter down information based upon what type of hazard that's out there, as well as the individual lifelines that are out there. So we have a resource that's out there for our community to pull down data that is necessary for their particular lifeline that they are dealing with. We can have kind of this data compilation for necessary data and assets that are out there. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen real quick here, and Terry, if I can have you put the PowerPoint slide back up again. So some of the key lessons that we learned from this process. Let me see if I can take control again. All right, getting to my last slide. Do you all see a key takeaways slide now? Okay, I see a thumbs up. Okay, first piece to the puzzle, crosswalks help. You got to know what it is you're going to be dealing with. Where's that information going? What sort of activity you need to do based upon that information that's out there. Sharing with the community builds your increased partnership and transparency. Knowing who's who in the zoo is 9/10 of the battle when we talk about emergency management. And knowing who those authoritative sources are for that information helps us to better move forward there. Local and state data value resources versus national data sets. Many cases here, state data may be, in our case, more relevant or more pertinent to our jurisdiction than kind of that federal level data set. So make sure that you know and understand the differences in how that data is out there. Sharing data via ArcGIS Online is the easiest way for us to communicate information, etc. out there. And I'm trying to see here. Looks like things kind of blurred out a little bit for a minute. Some data sets only come from federal sources, so make sure you know how to find them and where those locations are and who the authority is for that information. And then the last point that I'll make, echoing what's already been mentioned in this webinar, HIFLD is still here. There is data that already exists within that platform. It's just served out in a slightly different manner, and making sure that you build those relationships in order to get that information and be able to effectively communicate that out to your community. So With that said, I will pass the baton back over to Denise for the next part of the presentation today. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Gosh, your state level approach is so smart, and it really makes me optimistic that we can come out of this transition more resilient from a data perspective than we have been. So thank you for your leadership in figuring out how to navigate this all. And it's just fabulous to see your data ducks all in a row in Oregon. I know that will pay off for years to come. I'd like to pass it off next to Jeff Barani from Esri. Jeff, it sounds like the chat audience is very interested to hear what Esri is doing. So can you share what Esri is doing with HIFLD sunsetting?
Sure. Thanks, Denise, and thanks everyone. And I guess I wanted to start kind of in a similar manner to what Daniel described, and really kind of talk through and share like my journey, like what we went through, kind of evaluating what was in that spreadsheet, looking at the different sources and all that. And I think one of the key takeaways is a lot of surprises. I would say surprises in a positive way. As you heard in this webinar, I would never expect in 1,000 years for Taylor Swift and HIFLD to be mentioned in the same sentence, right? That's but that's very powerful, right? The impact that has in public events. And I think the second surprise and kind of the lead up there is that there was a lot more, as Daniel mentioned, there's a lot more great data sets and great hub sites out there than I expected. In this journey of going through and looking at evaluating what was in the spreadsheet and what other data sets were out there, was a positive one. We discovered some new things that we could highlight, new things that we could share with you, and things that we weren't aware of before. And so really in this section, we wanted to share a little bit of kind of hope and a little bit of what we discovered in that process, and we'll also kind of address some of the questions that have come up in the chat. So I mean, obviously there's a wealth of data out there, including a lot of great map services from the USGS that included things like police stations, fire stations, and just a wealth of layers upon layers with inside map services from the USGS with a great amount of data, and some of it we weren't even looking at from kind of the HIFLD perspective, and other things that can support our mission needs beyond what we kind of expected and what were there. Is Daniel already kind of mentioned this, but in the spreadsheet that listed out a great set of destinations of landing pages for other organizations, and there were certainly some hub sites that we hadn't, that I hadn't seen before, and they're listed here, on this slide. And I think Terry mentioned at the beginning, but with this way that we're doing things in Zoom, or excuse me, in Teams today, you can just reach out and touch those links, and those should open for you directly live and the webinar. And obviously the slides will be kind of shared, afterwards. But again, the wealth of hub sites that are existing today already with inside, various, hub sites, and, hundreds of data layers across, many different agencies, kind of following a lot of the best practices for data sharing that we really kind of see, kind of from across, the community. And it really would encourage you to check out a lot of those existing data sources and see, what's there. Obviously, this isn't, a public source, but really thinking about things from point of interest databases. And I think even way back in the day, we were looking at SIC and NAICS code really to help us find things. And don't forget that some of you may have access to Business Analyst, the Business Analyst extension today with inside your your Esri arsenal. There's other POI data sets from SafeGraph and others, and really think about things in new ways. And okay, what do I need to laser in on from a critical infrastructure perspective, and what can I look at from a NAICS code to help me really identify and start to segment things out? I think we've we've had the luxury of access to some of this data already through other licensing mechanisms, but maybe as a part of your journey and as a part of what you need to prepare for, maybe this is something to reevaluate as a part of the process. I think what many of you want to hear though is where are we at from a living atlas perspective? And so there was, as some of you asked in the chat, there was some HIFLD data that was rebroadcast in the living atlas, and that continues to stay there today. For the things that were there, I think there were things like cell towers and a couple of other data elements. So those anything that was there from the HIFLD side will continue to stay there. Was discussed that will age over time, and so we have certainly documented the last published date that is there. We've also updated some of the metadata to describe that to be compliant with things kind of moving forward. So I guess one big foot stomping thing is if anything was there already in the living atlas, that's not going away. So that continues to remain. So I actually hadn't looked at this in a while, and I would encourage you to explore this. So there's two hyperlinks there for the Esri US federal data ArcGIS Online user and the Esri federal user community user. So if you click on either of those links, and we'll send this out in the chat, there's a wealth of data that's already been made accessible in an ArcGIS Online format and feature services. These aren't shape files that you have to download and publish on your own. And so some of the previous HIFLD layers live within inside this collection. But I would, like I said, I would encourage you to explore this even more to find other data that may be important to meet your mission needs and some of the things that you didn't even realize that were out there. So we continued from the Esri side. We continue to monitor the situation. We continue to see what are some of the most appropriate ways that we can support you all, the GIS disaster response community, and a lot of the work you do, and what's appropriate from the Esri side to be able to kind of contribute to this process, knowing that there's a lot of great work going on in a lot of different areas, the wealth of data sets that are already out there, the great work that continues on the HIFLD side to continue to make a lot of great data and data sets available. So we'll obviously continue to monitor it and support the situation and you all, the user community, the best we can. One of the other things that we started to look at is, well, how can, in a similar way that Daniel, mentioned, how can we, provide a access or a different view into this data to help you laser into some of the things that you're, looking for. So there's a group gallery app that we've had on our disaster response program hub site for many years, and that's been updated with some of the data updates here. And again, some of the surprises, there was a set of schools layers that were available from another source. There's hospitals that are registered with Medicaid, for example. So again, a wealth of data out there, and you can slice and dice and filter and get into these data sets in a variety of different ways. But again, this is a resource that's available today to look forward to help you on your journey of looking for open data sources to find a lot of these things that are out there and available. So I guess just kind of wrapping up in this kind of section, again, just kind of emphasizing that journey that I would encourage you to take. Are there other great data sources out there? Are there other things from state agencies, either regulatory data or licensed data exports at a variety of different levels? It's a chance to communicate and ask what other agencies are doing. I feel like a lot of times in emergency management agencies, we're really the party planners, right? We need to be connected to many others kind of throughout across the community. This may be another excuse to reach out, especially in some of those deficiencies and gaps that you're looking to fill, in new ways. So it's a way to kind of think through that, and just kind of again ending on hope. And as Denise mentioned at the beginning, there's a lot of positive things that are still there. There's still secured sources of data that are out there. It's a chance to reevaluate the things that are there. Obviously, we're kind of forced into that, but that's also not a bad thing to be able to go out and look. And the thing that was really kind of encouraging to me is all the great data that's out there, and a lot of the help that we've had kind of across the community, being able to look to other partners across the community to be able to find what's going on and leverage from others. So yeah, that concludes my section. And so yeah, like I said, we'll continue to monitor and support the user community the best we can. So back to you.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm so grateful for Esri's role in smoothing this transition. And thanks to our panelists for their time and expertise with us that they shared with us today. And thank you for all of you for joining today. We often take federal data for granted, and I appreciate you all answering DHS's call for input on this essential collection of federal data.
Yes, and I know we covered a lot today, so because there's a lot of things that have been changing. There's a lot of valuable links that folks shared. So I just want to remind you all that all of that will be included: the slides, the recording, the survey links, and all the great resources that our panelists have shared will be available after this webinar.
Thanks. And so you should have your windows open to submit those use cases. Our colleagues in DHS have asked for our help, so let's deliver for them. Thank you, everyone, and we'll give you back a few minutes of your day. And we'll stay open. So if there's any technical questions about submitting the forms or anything else that folks want to ask, I'll turn it over to Terry to moderate that.
Great, thank you.